Hi, welcome to the American Center in Moscow's online programming. Today I have a good friend, a great musician, a great songwriter, John Winn, with me today. And we're going to talk a little bit about his life, his career, and specifically around his time in Russia and the making of this song, Vladivostok. Hi, John. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing great. Um, I'd love to just hear a little bit about uh, who you are and maybe just briefly like how did you get the idea for this song, and then I'd love to play the song.
Yeah. So I'm a musician. I sing and I play. On the recording, you'll hear I'm playing the soprano saxophone as well as singing. Um, and I had this great band of guys who I had actually been a teacher of at university for a few years. But I was pretty close to their age, and we started playing together back in the late 90s, just doing some kind of weeknight gigs and things like that. And I was kind of alerted to the fact that at that time the Kennedy Center in Washington worked with the U.S. State Department to send bands, jazz bands, and other types of American music groups out all over the world as cultural ambassadors. And so I was like, this would be fun. Let me get the guys together and we'll apply for this. And so we did do a State Department tour in 2004 that took us all over the place, mostly in the Pacific. So South Korea and Cambodia. And that's how we landed in Vladivostok, specifically in that kind of area of the world. And we loved our time there so much. And they apparently liked having us. They had us back later that same year for their first ever International Jazz Festival in October of 2024. We had originally been in June. And then 5 years later, we went back. We were invited back for the 5-year anniversary jazz festival. That was 2009. And I thought, man, we love it over there so much and love the people that we've met. And we owe them a song. So I wrote this song kind of in honor of the place, the people, and also how we, 4 guys in the band, felt about Vladivostok specifically and about the people. And so that's kind of how the song came about, and we recorded it and made a bunch of CDs and took them over there, and hopefully some are still floating around.
Well, we'll get back to some of this that you're talking about. I'd love to kind of dive in there, but let's listen to this song. Oh,
Those pictures are right, but I didn't hear any audio.
yeah, no audio yet. Well, we can get back to that in a minute as soon as we get that figured out. If you guys can just, you can let us know when you're ready to roll it.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about the lyrics. I know that the lyrics are posted in the YouTube link. So can you maybe read us the lyrics in English?
Yeah. So in another time and place, I feel a different warm embrace as night becomes the day. Looking out across the sea, which separates that life from me, a song begins to play. And all of that is really just to say, kind of put a spin on how we felt about the place. It was interesting for us. This tour was mostly, as I said, Asian countries that we did. And Vladivostok, kind of sandwiched in the middle of it, is a European culture, is culturally European, of course, but being so far over on the Pacific coast, literally in Asia, it's kind of this cultural island in the middle of all these other places that we went. And so in some ways felt more familiar to us as a Western, country, but also they're so far removed from Moscow and St. Petersburg that
Yeah.
I think they often, the denizens of Vladivostok, feel a little bit on an island. And so it's kind of this magical place. And so in another time and place, I feel a different warm embrace. It's like we had a second home. As night becomes the day, and that just refers to that we're on literally where I live on the East Coast of the United States, and where those guys are on the far East Coast of Russia, on the Pacific, is literally night and day. When it's daytime here, it's nighttime there. So that's what that means. And then looking out across the sea, so that's both literal and figurative, the sea that separates that life from me. So we felt like we had this kind of different, fun, secret life when we were there, where we just got to do all these interesting things and hang out with all these different and interesting people than who we knew back here. We know different, interesting people here too, but so looking out across the sea, which separates that life from me, a song begins to play. And so the idea is that the song was coming to me in my head. And then that's the next line. It's only in my head, no proof in sound to spread the truth we own. A name that few will know, we set aside our prose for poetry. So the song started in my head, no proof in sound, so it's not really alive yet, to spread the truth we own about the place. A name that few will know is Vladivostok. When people say, oh, you went to Russia, Moscow? No. St. Petersburg? No. Vladivostok, which I think is either the third or fourth largest city in the country. And even when you talk to Russians, oh, I've been to Russia, and they're like, oh, where did you go? And they say and I say Vladivostok. They're like, really? How did you end up there? It's kind of a frontier, city, but it's really a beautiful city with beautiful people. So that's a name that few will know. That's what that refers to. And we set aside our prose for poetry. That means we stop talking about the place and start playing and singing about the place.
Right. Awesome. Well, I think we're ready to hear it. Let's take a listen.
In another time and place, I feel a different warm embrace as night becomes the day. Looking out across the sea, which separates that life from me, a song begins to play. It's only in my head, no proof in sound to spread the truth we own. We set aside our prose for poetry. Vladivostok, you put a spell on me. Vladivostok, words enough to understand. The spell is cast and taking hands, we dance into the day. Familiar voices fill the choir that resonates with shared desire to have a song hold sway. A solitary tone rings out above the drone of every day. Fading beat, the story incomplete, I'd like to know. Vladivostok, you put a spell on me. back across the sea, which separates this life from me. I must be on my way.
What a great song! It's so good.
Thanks.
I hear the Beatles. I hear Elton John. I hear a lot of your influences there. So I want to just mention that John is a musician that has been an educator and a performer in well, for over probably close to 30 years now, right, John?
Yep, that's about right.
And one thing I've always really admired about you and love about your style is that you really incorporate from so many different corners of the musical empire universe. I mean, you are a classical musician. You play. John's played with every single show that comes through. So he's played with tons and tons of really famous Broadway shows and theater, any kind of theater that comes through town. You've played with you play with a lot of really well-known people. You've written your own songs for as long as I can remember, which are always very pop informed because you really have a great deep respect and love of pop music. It sounds like musical theater, and of course jazz. Like you're a trained jazz musician, so it's just very unique because I don't hear this combination in any other musician I can think of. So I love this song because it kind of has a little bit of everything. It's a great depiction of you as a musician in some ways. Can you tell us a little bit about your songwriting process because you do write in a lot of different genres too. So how do you get an idea for a song? Does the music come first? Do the lyrics come first? Does it just depend? When do you want to write a piece that's just instrumental? When do you want to write a song with lyrics? How do you flip between the styles? If you could give us some idea about that.
Yeah, well, we can start with that song a little bit. Yeah, I think with that one, the first thing I heard was the kind of the Vladivostok, like just the name of the place. And to answer your question about music or lyrics first, I mean, it's best for me when they both kind of come at once, not the whole lyric, of course, but at least the first idea or first couple of phrases, and I'm hearing a melody with the words. And I actually had two ideas for this song originally, which were bouncing back and forth. And so that middle kind of chill section that then has the saxophone solo in it was my original idea for the song. This kind of Vladivostok. But I didn't feel like it was strong enough for, like a chorus for the song. So I kind of ditched it, wrote all the rest of the song, which is the beatly pop sounding part. And then I was like, well, we're a jazz group. We got to have some improv in there. So I went back to that original bit and had it kind of open up as a place where we could improvise. And you hear a bass solo by Curtis Fye, our bassist. And then I play that soprano saxophone solo. So that's kind of our improv section. That's jazz oriented, plopped in the middle of a pop song. Yeah. So that's kind of how that song sounds like two songs a little bit. And you could certainly play it. And I have just, if I'm playing it around here on the piano, I just leave that middle section out because it's for the improv, it's for the band, but so it works that way too. And yeah, I mean, I just kind of, I have learned to just trust my instincts when I hear something, to just kind of go with it. I'm currently writing music for a musical theater piece, songs for that. And, sometimes I hear some stuff and it sounds maybe a little too much like Stephen Sondheim, who's one of my heroes, and so I'll be like, well, I don't know, I should probably stay away from that, and I'll try some other approach. And then I usually end up kind of going back to the first thought, as being the best thought, and just have to kind of trust it. But as you say, even within that musical theater piece, I've got elements of like 1960s soul music, 18th century classical music like Mozart, kind of almost jokingly in both of those in the same song, actually. So for me, what's interesting is to try to do things that I haven't done quite the same way already. And that is why I love the Beatles, for instance, or somebody like Stephen Sondheim or Miles Davis in jazz that was constantly reinventing themselves. So that's a big part of it. Sometimes lyrics come first, especially for this music theater stuff. You're often writing from lines on a page from a play, and that you then have to decide how to reconfigure to make them musical. So sometimes, yes, they have to be lyric led. Often I'll just hear a melody and just sing some dummy lyrics, meaning lyrics that don't make any sense to what the song's going to be, but just something that I can sing. Sometimes a few of those will stick around. So they're all different ways to skin a cat, as the saying goes here in America. And so it's kind of fun looking back when you've written some stuff to be like, oh, that's how I got there this time.
Yeah.
And that song we just heard, some of the arrangement aspects, the way we played it, came from Daniel Clark, our pianist as well, like the intro and the outro, the little piano thing. That was his idea. Some of the things that lead up to the chorus were his ideas, these kind of rhythm section hits, boom, 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 that I didn't originally have in the song. For me, it was the melody, the words, and the chords that I came up with. And then those guys kind of added stuff. That's typical, when you're writing for a band.
So tell us a little bit about Neighborliness. It's like an all-star band, just such a great. It's really interesting because you can have incredible players, just great players, and not have chemistry, and it kind of falls flat. But that's certainly not the case with you guys. You guys are all just incredible musicians of your own right, and there was something really magical that happened with you guys playing together in ensemble. Like, tell us a little bit about Neighborliness and about those guys, and about how it started, and when you're going to do a reunion tour. I'm waiting,
Yeah, I'm kind of waiting for that too. So those three guys are all about the same age. They're all within a year and a few months of each other in age. And we're all students at Virginia Commonwealth University, starting, I think, Daniel, the pianist, and Robbie, the drummer, started the same year, like 1997. And I had just started teaching there. I had gotten my master's degree there and had done a little bit of just like run an ensemble here and there. But that was my first year where I was teaching full time there. And then Curtis came the next year, the bass player, and Curtis and Daniel had gone all the way through high school together, and maybe even prior to that. But they kind of grew up playing music together. And so those three guys as students were just playing together all the time, inside of classes, but also outside, just, getting together. And they had a name for themselves called the Cold Cut Trio, which is kind of funny. And then somehow we began to book some gigs together. I'm about 8 years older than those guys. And ended up playing all over town here. And as you say, there was just a really great rapport. We had a guitarist in the band originally as well, who was in school there. He was a couple years older than those guys.
Was that Colin? Was it Colin McInerney?
Colin McInerney, yeah.
Colin?
Yeah. And so That's kind of how it got started. And we did all kinds of things, not just what you would think of as typical jazz, standard songs, or straight ahead, what we call straight ahead, like swing oriented jazz. But Daniel in particular really had his ear to the ground. At that time, there were a few people kind of starting to do this. Somebody like Brad Meldau, but or what's the trio? I'm blanking on the Bad Plus. The Bad Plus, they would
sure.
take, at the time, current pop songs or rock oriented songs like Radiohead songs or even some Beatles songs, and really reorient them for their own, combining them with their jazz sound. And so we were doing a lot of that kind of stuff, but often with me singing. And so on this CD that we recorded with Vladivostok on it, for instance, there's a song by Tears for Fears on there. There's a John Lennon song, Instant Karma, that we rearranged. The Who's My Generation is on there. But none of them sound really very much like the original. I mean, they're recognizable, but we really put our own spin on them. And so that kind of became, in a large way, our calling card. And these long kind of improvisatory jams, often at the end of a song, like what we heard in the middle of Vladivostok, we would often do at the end of a song, and just go who knows where. Every time we played a song, it was different than the last time we played it. And especially on that tour where we were playing at least 4 days a week together, if not many more times than that. It was really interesting over just a 5-week period how some of our repertoire really evolved and how we picked up new things. Yeah.
So just want to remind everybody that if that's watching, that you can send in questions, and we'd love to engage in that way if you're interested. John, I wanted to know what some of your your strongest memories of Russia are.
It was so interesting to us. We went there we flew into Japan and then to Busan, South Korea, and spent most of a week there. And then from Seoul over to Vladivostok. And it was just so strikingly different than where we had just come from, even though they're very close on the map. And not having, growing up in the United States, for me, for all of us really, toward the tail end of the Cold War, I think everybody kind of has their assumptions about a place. Russians would have those about us and vice versa. And so when we got there, it was a little chilly, even though it was June and it was kind of gray and rainy. And we were like, man, Russia's kind of rough, It was like, this is our first few hours. Okay. I don't know about this. And, but that attitude did not hold to be true at all. We made so many quick friends there, and the people were so beautiful and sweet to us and kind. And we met lots of musicians who we would keep seeing as we went back for repeated visits. Jazz musicians, classical musicians, people kind of just doing what we were doing, which is, playing concerts, playing gigs, playing in clubs. And so that kind of stuff was fun. It seemed like there was always a party to be had. Anytime we played a concert, there would be a big dinner for us in our honor afterwards with multiple toasts of vodka and, lots of fun to be had with that. Some of the guys took us out fishing in the bay one morning, which was really cool.
Yeah, you love it, right?
Yeah. And there's a picture of me somewhere with a fish that I caught that's this big, literally, on a hook. I'm holding it up next to my face. It's like that big. But meanwhile, we had just been asleep for like 2 or 3 hours, because after all the dinner and the toasts, then everybody goes out dancing. There was a club in Vladivostok in particular that we loved we played there a few times, and then would just hang out and keep dancing with everybody afterwards, called Zabriskie Point. I don't know if it's still there or not, but so those kinds of memories, and a lot of that's reflected in the song too. One of the lyrics that I didn't get to yet, and I won't go too much into the weeds on this, but words enough to understand, the spell is cast, and taking hands, we dance into the day. That's what that's about. Is
yeah.
we each understood a little bit of like this much Russian, and they understood a little more English, and we had some translators, words enough to understand. The spell is cast, and taking hands, we danced until the day. So that's really what we did when we were over there. So it was, it was a lot of fun. Just a really kind of magical, different place.
Yeah.
And as you can see, we were also over there for the end of one winter. When we were there in 2009, it was early March. I remember we were there on March 1st, which they celebrate as the first day of spring by going out into the bay and ice skating in the bay. And so those pictures of us in the snow was around the first day of the quote, first day of spring. So just a different, view of the world and things. It was fun.
So you have some newspaper clippings, right, from this time?
Yeah, I had some stuff. Well, so especially on our State Department tour, you could see some of the pictures there where we would be interviewed. We went to various smaller cities around Vladivostok. I wanted to mention one was Nakhodka, another was Ussurisk, and that was in the Primorye province. Artem. Our last trip, we flew from Vladivostok over to the island off the coast in Sakhalin.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so it was cool. And so the media, local media in these places would do little interviews with us. And so I found this. I think it's my name in Russian. You guys who read the language will, and it probably says what I do here.
Saxophonist, I think there, yeah. Nice.
But that's from one of those. Here's a ticket to one of our concerts. It was just kind of fun digging this stuff up. And we get a certificate for like having, been cultural ambassadors from the place. So that kind of stuff was really fun. And the newspaper, so here is some of the local press. It's a Vladivostok local newspaper.
That's great.
And that's from, I'm not sure from which time it is. I think it's probably the second time we went, which was still in 2004, but the picture was from the first time we were there. Kind of hilarious, especially if you know the guys in the band. That kind of stuff. Also, while we were there, we would pick up local music to learn. So this is a Russian folk song, I was told, and we were encouraged by somebody who worked, a Russian that worked at the U.S. consulate, to learn to sing this thing and perform it. And we did a bunch. It's called O Moros Moros. O Moros Moros. That's mostly what I remember of it because it's been years. Da 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 da. That kind of thing. Cool. And so we would incorporate that into our concerts. We played the jazz song Dark Eyes, which is really from an older Russian folk song. So we performed that a lot in a kind of a fast jazz style. So that kind of stuff was just fun for us because we certainly weren't in the newspaper around here all the time. We were a little bit, but it was kind of nice to see that.
That's awesome. So one of the questions from the audience is when was this? And it was 2004 to 2009 was about the time that you guys were doing these tours. And Vladivostok was in that region. That was where you never went to Moscow or.
We flew through Moscow. We flew in and out one time. I tell people this was kind of interesting. I think I said this to you the other day. That year of 2004, we actually circumnavigated the globe within that few month period because we flew from Washington, D.C. across the United States west to Japan, then eventually to Vladivostok. So we flew over the Pacific. And then when they had us back later in the year, in October, we flew from Washington to Moscow, got on another plane, had to refuel in the middle of the night, in the middle of the country to get to Vladivostok that way. So we actually had flown all the way around the world in those two trips. So we never performed in Moscow, but we did spend some time there. And that was a lot of fun. We have some great pictures of that. I remember I had a newborn son at the time. And I bought him one of the little Russian stacking dolls that was all Winnie the Pooh characters right there near Red Square. It was kind of, and he loved that toy for the early part of his life, for sure.
We got when we were in Moscow, which I think is an amazing city, really truly beautiful and just really cosmopolitan. But we got the Matryoshka dolls that were Soviet cosmonauts instead of the like traditional ladies, which I love that.
They had all kinds. I remember they had all the Russian, premiers, going back, like, I guess Putin was the big one. Then you'd open it up and it was Yeltsin, and it just went backwards, Gorbachev, etc. So that was kind of fun.
Well, here's a great question from the audience. How do you create when you are not in the mood to create, but you have to?
That is a great question. And I'm dealing with that. Today, I had a pretty good day before I got on this. But yesterday, there's this particular song I'm trying to get started on. And I have a deadline for this. This is for this musical theater piece that I'm writing. So I've written a bunch of songs for it, and I have really 2 more that I need to write before we do a workshop on it in January. But I need to get them written so that Daniel actually has been helping me. We just recorded one of the songs the other day. He's helping me do demos on them so the actors can learn them. So that's my deadline.
Sure.
Deadlines are important to answer part of your question. That is sometimes how you create when you're not in the mood. You just have to. So yesterday I was having a really hard time, and I'd written some notes and some potential lyrics, and like these are the things I have to get to in the song. And I was like, oh, this is a drag. So I went out and raked some leaves, and I took a shower, and I avoided it a lot, and I took a nap. And then I came back to the piano at like 7 o'clock at night, and then I got some ideas going. And so I got up this morning, and I think I kind of like these. That's really important, check back in.
Yes.
Do I still like this, or is it terrible?
Yeah.
It will always strike you differently the next time you sit down with it, but it might be just slightly differently, or it might be really bad. So what I am finding is you just have to chip away. You just have to make yourself sit down every day. And if there are 4 or 5 days in a row where you feel like you get nothing done, you are actually getting something done up here. You're going through things that don't work. You're going through options. You're hearing. One reason I went out to rake the leaves is I was working on the music, but I could just continue to hear it as I was doing something else. It's what we kind of like working meditation, if you will.
Yeah.
But you kind of let the stuff ruminate. And then I find there's no rhyme or reason to it necessarily. But then notice I did have something that I liked, by yesterday evening, which is usually when I give up and just say, forget it. I'm going to have a beer and watch some TV, which I did also do, but later. And so I think that's the key is come back, and also not necessarily to be wed to, even if you got something good, if it's not exactly right, if it doesn't work for the song or for the situation, just to be willing to shelve it, let it go, so you can use it for something else later. That's really important, is to not get too stuck or fall too much in love with your own ideas. And I am very guilty of that. I mean, I don't like to throw things out, and the witness to that is the Vladivostok song, where I have both versions of what I was, the thing I started with and the thing I ended up with, which was better. But I still snuck in the first stuff because I liked some elements of it. So, it's cheating in a way. But
well, what I hear you say is that there's definitely an element of discipline that matters, right? That as you keep coming back to something and you just make that time and space, you're kind of honoring the time and space that it takes to be creative. And of course, there are times when inspiration strikes and it's just like, it's like a flood and you kind of get it all in one moment. But I think that's rare. I think a lot of times it's like the actual working it out and really treating it like with respect, right? And I'm curious, do you have a time of day that you generally feel more productive? Like, are you morning? Are you night? Are you afternoon? When do you find yourself?
Yeah, when I was younger, I'm still a night person. I still stay up till usually after midnight, but I don't work very well at night unless I'm like really under a deadline, and I just have to keep going to get certain things done. But my creative energy, I have found, it used to be pretty good. I used to write a lot of songs at night after the day was done. I felt like everybody was asleep. The world had disappeared and I could get stuff done. I don't do it that much anymore. I find my creative energy is the best, and I hear new things and things more clearly earlier in the day. So I'll usually get up, have a cup of coffee, do a crossword puzzle to get my brain moving a little bit. And then, even though I don't want to most days, sit down and just deal with whatever it is that I've said to myself I need to deal with that day. And then I do try to come back to especially if I get something rolling, then I want to come back to it once or twice more in the day, to kind of let it ruminate. One good thing is that I find is, and this isn't only me talking, I read a book by Jeff Tweedy, who's main songwriter in the band Wilco, and he was talking about this kind of dealing with your stuff that you created that day last thing before you go to bed, because when you do that, then you go to sleep, but your brain is working on it still, and you'll come up with it. You'll come up with some good ideas while you're sleeping. It feels like, oh, I woke up and had this thought, but really you had it a couple hours before probably, and it's just now you're able to act on it. So that kind of stuff.
I find that true even with like memorizing things. When I have to memorize pieces, if I do the work and everything, but then if I take a look at it right before I go to sleep, it's like something happens. It's like some cognitive thing that happens that to like cement it into you more. Right. And I think it's the same way when you're working on something, like creating something. I have to read this comment because it's so lovely. This is from someone watching. The lyrics are fantastic. I can imagine what you experienced for sure. Thank you for immortalizing my hometown through your beautiful song. Which that's pretty high praise. I think I would take that.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much.
I think that the song kind of surprised me because there's a lot of longing in the song. There's a lot of like, you feel like someone, I feel your experience, but it kind of surprised me that it was so, it's like a nostalgia almost, or like a longing, really.
We really missed it when we left every time. And so this was the third time we were going back, and and it had been 5 years since we were there, almost 4.5 years. And so, I was trying to definitely capture that. There was another lyric that kind of deals with that. Well, it's the very end of the song. The song ends after it calms down. Looking back across the sea, which separates this life from me, I must be on my way. It's like you have to go back to reality. You have to go back to the daily grind and the stuff you do every day and the same people that you see all the time. Not that they're, I'm not dissing any of those people, but it was like going to a wonderland. It's like a little Through the Looking Glass or the Narnia wardrobe, where you can just walk into this different place and then you have to go back.
It's very romantic in like the true sense of the word, like that there's like, it feels kind of adventurous and like you are getting to live like this alternate reality for a little while. It's really, I think it's a really song.
No, and I think you get that. You get that anytime you travel, but some places more than others. Yeah.
Some places for sure are just strike you. So you, I'm a vocalist as well. I've done several of these interviews for the American Center here. And I'm curious to know why, like so many musicians that I work with who don't sing, don't know the names of songs. They never listen to the lyrics of songs. And for me as a vocalist, like lyrics are so important. And so it's funny to me how many musicians just like, they don't connect there at all. And so where you are both, you straddle that line all the time because you're an amazing vocalist and you're an amazing wind player. So how do you think your perspective is different as a musician vocalist than just a musician or just a vocalist? I think it's actually very unique. And I think that it's not super common. And I think it's probably informs a lot of your songwriting too. So I'm just curious for you to talk a little bit about that.
There are old school jazz teachers that talk about, and jazz musicians that talk about, who aren't singers, that talk about, you must know the lyrics to the songs that you're playing.
Oh, wow.
Sonny Rollins talks about that, the great saxophonist. My son, Killian, is 21 now. He's in jazz school in New Jersey, and he's a bass player. And the guy who heads his program up there, his name is Bill Charlap. He's a great pianist, and he played with Tony Bennett for many years. He's one of those advocates. Then I just read an interview recently with Bill Evans, the great jazz pianist from the 70s, and he said, I never know the lyrics to any of the songs. So he says, it doesn't help me at all. He said, even when I'm playing with singers, I don't think about the lyrics. So I think it's legit. And you've been on gigs with me. You see how many lyrics I still have to read of songs that I've been singing for years and years. There's a big part of me that is like the first thing you described, which is I don't know the lyrics to lots of songs. Because what ensnares me more is the overall vibe and the musical aspects of even Beatles songs, which I've known for years and years and years. I'll scramble the lyrics all up if I'm just singing along with those guys, So I don't know. I think for me, the music is the bigger thing. What I love is when I get what I consider to be a great lyric. And I really like this one, Vladivostok, that fits with the music so perfectly that it's a glove. And then you can't separate them. And then I know those lyrics.
Right.
And that happens a lot of times in great songs of all types, but a lot of times in musical theater that happens because you're writing for a very specific scene or a very specific character. There's something you're really trying to convey. And Stephen Sondheim talks about that. He says he way prefers writing music than the lyrics, even though he's such a great lyricist and was known originally for that. He said lyric writing is so much more difficult.
I completely agree.
Yeah, good lyric writing. I mean, it takes me way more time. I'm at a place where music comes to me pretty quickly now, but not necessarily lyrics.
I think the problem with lyrics is that when you're trying to actually access something very universal that you're going to talk about, love or longing or sadness or whatever, it's very easy to just sound very cliche. It's very hard to think of a unique kind of fresh way to say these things that affect all of us. And that's really where the waiting comes in, and being steeped in really good lyric writing and practicing it a lot too. But I think that's where that's really the kicker. That's the real challenge,
Yeah, for sure. So, and there are a lot of what we call place songs that have been written over the years. And I think of two Billy Joel ones, which were probably inspirational to me when I was writing this. One I know was a little bit, I didn't listen to them purposefully, but Vienna is one of his songs that's not really about Vienna, the city. It's more of about a state of mind. Vienna waits for you. And then another is New York State of Mind, that is, again, it's not about the place so much as the state of mind, the how you feel when you're there. And so I was trying to make this song that way.
Yeah. I mean, the place becomes a metaphor for something bigger. Right. So what are the guys in Neighborliness doing these days? Like, what is the rest of the band up to? Where have your careers taken you in the last 20 years, 15 years?
Well, Robbie Sinclair, the drummer, he lived for many years in New York, a little while in Washington. Then he got married to an artist who was French. They lived in Los Angeles for a while and then moved to France around the COVID time. So 4 years or so ago. And he's still over there and is playing with a bunch of different people. And he does kind of a pop hip hop thing. Have you seen any of his stuff posted? I can't remember. I can't remember who it is, but he's kind of a big deal. Like he's playing stadiums with this guy.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then Daniel Clark, the pianist, not long after our last trip, actually right before this last trip in 2009, I remember the year before, he had gotten a couple of high profile tours going. He had started working. He did a recording with the pop singer and actress, Mandy Moore, here, and did a little tour with her and kind of got into the music industry larger writ that way. And then pretty soon got to be in KD Lang's band.
Mhm.
She's a great singer from Canada, but lives alternately in the U.S. and Canada, West Coast. And toured and did all kinds of stuff. Toured the world with her, played at the White House for President Obama, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, for years and years. And then has played with a few other people and really done some, great things in the music industry. But he's kind of back home now. He's got 2 young daughters, and so he's settled down a little bit from all the touring. And then Curtis, our bass player, Curtis Fye. So, by the way, just incidentally, Daniel and I tonight have a duo gig, just the 2 of us, and then tomorrow night I have a gig with Curtis, more of
That's
a party
awesome.
type thing. So I still see these guys. Curtis lived for many years in Washington, D.C., and he's gotten much more into studio production as an engineer, as a studio engineer, and he's a really great recording engineer, besides being a really fine bass player. So he's moved back here, which is his home, and is doing a lot of studio oriented stuff, kind of as his day job, if you will, here.
So I have a question about, so when Neighborliness kind of just naturally kind of stopped playing because of people's lives.
At some point, all those guys I was the only one here anymore at a certain point. Yeah.
I'm sure that was a big outlet for you for songwriting in some ways. Like, so I know that musical theater stuff, you've been working on this, but have you kept writing even in spite of not having like a direct, someone to write for, something to write for?
Yeah. So luckily, starting I think in 2002, my wife, who's a violinist, and I got hooked up with. We lived in Denver, Colorado, for just a brief period, and this was just a couple years prior to us going on the tours and stuff. Neighborliness. We moved back here, but made some connections in Denver. One was with a woman who's in the Colorado Symphony out there, who runs kind of a small classical chamber music festival in upstate New York, very close to Canada, actually, in the Adirondack Mountains. And that has been an outlet for me over all these years to write music for chamber groups like string quartet. Just this past summer, we premiered a brand new string trio. I was working on that for most of the early part of this year. It was also just played recently here in Richmond. So that string trio is, violin, viola, cello. And I kind of, as you said, so, I studied classical composition in school, but I always like the things I hear are not necessarily your grandfather's classical music. Some, yes, and then some other elements come in. And so that's been a nice outlet for me. I wrote a song cycle that was performed and recorded by that group. It's called Loon Lake Live. That's where the festival is. And the song cycle was just dealing with the modern age, things that are particular to us in this time that we're alive. And so they were kind of like pop songs. A few people said, "Oh, that one sounds like a theater song," but one here, and the rest kind of sound like pop tunes. One is very classical, like Bela Bartok. I did that on purpose, but just to kind of convey aspects of our life in modern times. So I've been able to write. For that, it allows me to still be a songwriter, but I actually write all the string parts and compose it as well. So those kinds of things. For many years when I was teaching, I would write from time to time for the band that I had at school. I was teaching at the high school level. I wrote a little suite celebrating the 100th anniversary of the school where I was teaching, the centennial. Things like that. Just excuses really to do things that I wouldn't have done otherwise.
Yeah.
And this song is an example of that too. I mean, had we not been over there, this song would not have existed. So if you hadn't been asked back over there, that's right. The other part of it. So
we're getting ready to wrap up here in just a few minutes, but I'd love to know I know your father is a musician. But how did you discover that you wanted to play saxophone, that you loved singing? How did music come to you as and maybe tell us a little bit about some of your early memories and how you decided that this is what you wanted to do.
I mean, I pretty much, as you said, I grew up, my father was a high school band and choral director. He had
Oh,
choir
wow.
classes and band classes. And he also taught a little bit of theater, like drama class here and there, and participated in that stuff. I used to see him from the time I was young, very young, out playing, what we call gigs, just jobs. They might be for dances or just for some outdoor kind of event or something, and just a quintet, 5 guys. And he was a saxophonist and a singer as well. And so I think obviously I imprinted on that
Yeah.
from a very, very early age, thought all the way through school, hey, I'm going to be a teacher, be a band director, blah, 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 blah. I didn't quite go full on that route as he did. The teaching that I've done has been a little different. I taught at several universities and then a private high school where I was able to kind of make up fun classes to teach that are a little off the beaten path. But that was really it, I think, just growing up. Once I was old enough, I actually played guitar as my first instrument, but got more into the saxophone and stuff as I grew older, and would play some gigs with his band. And then, by the time I was 18 or so, starting to do some of those gigs on my own to get hired by people or play in a musical theater pit, even when I was still in high school. That kind of stuff was very attractive to me. So I kind of always had that as just, oh, this is what I'm going to do. It wasn't really ever a question. Not that my parents were forcing me to that. I did some acting too as a kid, which I also really liked, but it was just kind of that's what we do. It's the family business. It's that whole thing of the family business. So
for sure. And it sounds like there was a lot of different, I would love to hear about some of your top influences, because I know it's very varied, and I know those things come to us. Some things come really young, but then a lot of things we end up discovering as we're on our own musical journey. So could you talk a little bit about some of your early influences and your current, what you're into? I mean, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, so my parents, interestingly, they were teenagers they were graduating from high school in 1956, which is right when Elvis was hitting and the whole rock and roll thing was hitting. But they were never really into rock-oriented music that much. I mean, pop radio was on when I was a kid in the 70s. So that's probably where I first heard Billy Joel and the Beatles and some of those guys that I really liked. But I was also around the theater. My mom was really good about taking us to see plays and musicals, and I was in some musicals as a kid. So I heard a lot of Rodgers and Hammerstein. I was in The King and I when I was 5 years old, for instance, or awesome. Oliver, when I was 11, shows like that. So that stuff got in my ear. And I kind of discovered the Beatles when I hit middle school, which was in the early 80s, basically 20 years after they were just starting out. But I had heard a lot of the more familiar songs, but I really got into, I need to hear every song and really get with it. So yeah, they were a big influence. And from there, I got into Billy Joel. So those singer-songwriter types, but notice with those guys, they're people whose each album sounds a little different than the one that came before it. And so a band like Radiohead is kind of a modern corollary to that, more contemporary corollary to that. I really respond to, now I like some really rocking out stuff. I love the early Police. I think Sting is one of the great songwriters of the last 50 years. And, Elton John, as you mentioned before, I like Randy Newman a lot. So you know how it is. You just kind of find things as if you like this guy, then maybe you'll really like this guy. So Elvis Costello is another one of mine. Sure. And people like Rufus Wainwright,
amazing,
Sufjan Stevens, and a lot of female songwriters like Regina Spektor I really like, Leslie Feist. So there's a lot to check out. And then I actually saw a production that had been videotaped in the 80s of the tour of Sweeney Todd after it had stopped playing on Broadway. And I happened to catch that one night on public television when I was still in high school. I was like, man, that is like the best theater show I've ever seen. You know, the music is the greatest. And so I really got into Stephen Sondheim around that time. And then getting into jazz, you know, friends turn you on to it. You go to music school. I was playing a lot of jazz. You kind of get into, find your favorite guys in that realm as well. So singers, like, I really love Tony Bennett. Sinatra, of course, Ella Fitzgerald, Harry Connick Jr. Those were Sarah Vaughan was a big one for me. And, you know, as players, like tons of saxophone players, Cannonball Adderley, Art Blakey's bands, that just bands like that I really responded to. But you're right, that's very diverse. That's a lot of stuff. And I didn't even talk about the classical music. So that's the thing for me, is I don't like to be bored with music. I do like to kind of check out lots of different things.
Well, I think it's a great testament to just like the way that you operate as a musician, because I think, you know, I've had the great opportunity to work with John both as a vocalist and as a horn player, and you always come kind of, well, always with excellence, but demanding and expecting that of everybody else too, which is great. But there's also this wide openness to, like, you know, whatever is good in music is good, and we can incorporate, or we can play with, or we can, you know, mess around with. I love that attitude, that it doesn't have to be this way, and that's the only thing we can really do. I love that it's very adventurous, and I think it makes it accessible in a way that, you know, I really appreciate, because I think music is really ultimately about connection. And so I love
people can feel that from the stage, you know. If you're making some stuff up right now, they can tell. I mean, and it's risky, but there's always there's an energy to it that's different than, this is how we played this the last 21 days on tour, you know.
Absolutely. And that's something that's really interesting. I love that about Neighborliness. I mean, for me, the whole idea of really developing and having the wonderful privilege of getting to have ensemble where you really trust each other and you know your repertoire, is that you can then break it apart, open it up, do something different to keep you engaged as an artist, as a musician, right? Which I think is the most fun. So I'm really personally rooting for the Neighborliness reunion tour 2025. So
I did bring it up recently to Daniel, and I think Robbie's going to be here around Christmas time, but we haven't really located a place where we could play, and so one of these days we'll get it.
One of these days. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, John. This was a great conversation and a beautiful song, a great look into your brain. Thanks for joining us here at the American Center with Moscow, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.